No one ever looked for Miss Eleanor Fairley. They looked past her. In the mirrored ballroom of Harrington House, chandeliers blazed like captured stars, scattering light over silks, jewels, and ambition. Laughter rang in polished arcs. Mothers appraised fortunes with the sharpness of jewelers. Gentlemen surveyed the room as hunters might a field, measuring, choosing, discarding. Eleanor stood at the edge of it all, perfectly still. Her gown was dove gray, deliberately modest, chosen to avoid notice rather than invite it. Her gloves hid hands roughened by years of managing an ailing household. Her hair, carefully arranged, lacked the calculated extravagance that turned heads. She had learned long ago that beauty wielded without defense was dangerous, and beauty wielded without power was useless. So she made herself small. Tonight marked her third season, and as with the two before it, she had not been asked to dance. She told herself it no longer stung. Across the room, Lady Bramwell whispered behind her fan, eyes flicking toward Eleanor with faint amusement. Poor thing, that look said. Too clever, too plain, too invisible. Eleanor felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the quiet humiliation she carried with the composure of long practice. She had come not for hope but for duty. Her mother's cough had worsened. Their finances had thinned to transparency. This season was not about romance. It was about survival. That was when the music faltered. Not stopped, shifted. A subtle hitch ran through the orchestra, as though every violinist had drawn breath at once. Conversations softened. Fans stilled mid-flick. Eleanor did not need to turn to know who had entered. He felt him. The Duke of Blackmore. He stood just inside the ballroom doors, tall and dark as a storm cloud caught in human form. His reputation preceded him like thunder. Ruthless in business, cold in manner, untouchable in influence. He was not young, not handsome in the soft way of favored men, but there was a severity to him that made the air seem tighter, more aware of itself. Women watched him with careful eyes. Mothers recalculated. Gentlemen straightened. Eleanor lowered her gaze instinctively. She had seen him once before at a distance, and had resolved never to cross his path again. Men like him did not notice girls like her, unless they meant to crush them. And yet, her awareness sharpened. She felt it before she understood it, the sensation of being studied. Eleanor lifted her eyes. The Duke of Blackmore was looking directly at her. Not glancing. Not passing over. Her breath caught, traitorous and sharp. She looked behind her, absurdly certain he must be observing someone else. There was no one. Only a stretch of wall, a potted fern, and Eleanor herself. Their gazes locked. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not desire, not disdain, but calculation. As if she were a puzzle he had not expected to find in a room full of obvious answers. She should have looked away. She did not. He moved toward her. The space between them seemed to part unwillingly, like water before a blade. Whispers followed his progress. Eleanor's heart hammered so loudly she feared it would betray her. He stopped a precise distance from her. Close enough that she caught the faint scent of leather and winter air. Close enough that the heat of him disrupted the careful chill she kept around herself. "Miss Fairley," he said. Her name sounded different in his mouth, heavier, weighted with intention. "My lord," she replied, executing a flawless curtsy despite the sudden weakness in her knees. "You have been standing here for nearly an hour," he observed. "And no one has asked you to dance." The words were not unkind. They were devastating. Eleanor lifted her chin. "I find observation preferable to disappointment." One corner of his mouth curved. Not a smile but something like approval. "I require assistance," the Duke said quietly. "And you, Miss Fairley, require visibility." Her pulse skidded. "I propose a bargain." The orchestra resumed, oblivious. Laughter swelled again around them. But Eleanor felt as though the world had narrowed to this moment, this man, this impossible offer. "What sort of bargain?" she asked. His gaze dropped, briefly, deliberately, to her plain gown, her unremarkable gloves, her careful anonymity. "The kind," he said, "that will make you impossible to overlook." And before she could decide whether to flee or tremble, The Duke of Blackmore extended his hand to her, and the Tun began to stare. Eleanor did not take his hand. The pause stretched, one heartbeat then another, long enough for curiosity to ripple outward. A few heads turned. A few fans lifted. The Duke of Blackmore stood unmoving, his hand still extended, as though refusal were a concept he did not entertain. "Forgive me, my lord," Eleanor said softly, "but I am not in the habit of accepting mysteries from powerful men." A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, passed through his eyes. "Then allow me to clarify," he replied. "Walk with me." It was not a request. She should have declined. Every instinct honed by years of invisibility warned her that men like him changed lives without caring what was left behind. Yet another instinct, quieter, sharper, whispered that nothing would ever change if she remained where she was. She placed her gloved hand in his. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, not heat but awareness, as though her presence had suddenly been acknowledged by the world itself. They moved along the perimeter of the ballroom, the Duke guiding her with infuriating ease. Conversations faltered in their wake. Eleanor felt eyes upon her back, her profile, her once-forgotten existence now dragged into sharp relief. "My proposal is simple," he said once they reached the shadowed alcove near the tall windows. "I require a duchess." Eleanor almost laughed. "Then you have chosen the wrong woman to consult." "I require the right woman," he corrected. "And I do not trust the obvious candidates." She studied him more closely now. His expression was controlled, but beneath it lay fatigue, an edge of impatience as though the world had long disappointed him. "The Tun parades its daughters before me," he continued. "Fortunes wrapped in smiles, obedience mistaken for virtue. I will not bind my house to a woman who sees marriage as conquest." "And you believe I can identify one who does not?" Eleanor asked. "I believe," he said, "that women reveal themselves more honestly to those they dismiss." A chill ran through her. "And what do I gain in return for this service?" His gaze sharpened. "Transformation." The word struck like a match to tinder. "For the duration of the season," he said, "you will be seen at my side. You will dance when you wish. You will speak without being spoken over. Doors will open to you simply because you walk beside me." Eleanor's breath came shallow. "You propose to make me desirable." "I propose to make you visible," he said. "Desire will follow." She folded her hands to keep them from trembling. "And when you find your bride? You will step away with your reputation elevated, your prospects irrevocably altered." She searched his face for mockery and found none. Only certainty. "This is dangerous," she said. "Yes," he agreed calmly. A beat passed. "And what prevents society from assuming," she asked, "that I am already more to you than a convenience?" His gaze dropped to her mouth, then lifted again. "Nothing." The honesty of it stole her breath. "They will speculate," he continued. "They will whisper. And when I do not choose you, they will pity you." The words stung, but they rang true. "You would be sacrificing me," she said quietly. "I would be risking you," he corrected. "As I risk myself." Eleanor thought of her mother's labored breathing. The thinning household accounts. The years of waiting for a miracle that had never come. "I have conditions," she said at last. One dark brow lifted. "I would expect nothing less." "I will not be made a fool," she said. "I will not be touched, compromised, or humiliated for the sake of your convenience. And if I withdraw my consent, the arrangement ends." The Duke studied her as though she had surprised him all over again. "Agreed," he said. "On one condition of my own." She met his gaze steadily. "Name it." "You will not pretend indifference," he said. "If this is to work, you must allow the world to believe I have captured your interest." Heat crept up her neck. "You ask me to act the besotted debutante." "I ask you," he said softly, "to let them see what they never bothered to look for." The music swelled again, the waltz beginning. He extended his hand a second time. "Shall we begin, Miss Fairley?" Eleanor hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The Duke of Blackmore led her onto the dance floor. Gasps rippled. The wallflower had stepped into the light. and the bargain once struck could not be undone. Eleanor had never been so seen. The Duke of Blackmoor's hand rested at her waist with precise propriety, yet the effect was anything but restrained. As they moved through the waltz, she felt the collective gaze of the ballroom tighten around them like a held breath. Every turn drew whispers. Every measured step felt like a declaration. She kept her eyes on his shoulder, afraid that if she met his gaze she would forget this was performance. "You are trembling," he murmured too softly for anyone else to hear. "Then perhaps you should not have dragged a wallflower into the center of the storm," she replied. His thumb pressed once, barely, against her glove. "You are doing remarkably well." The dance ended to scattered applause. Eleanor curtsied, pulse racing, certain she would be released at once. Instead he did not let her go. "Remain with me," he said, turning them toward the refreshment table. "Tonight you are not to be alone." So she stayed. And with each passing hour, something dangerous unfolded. Men who had never noticed her before sought her opinion. Women studied her gowns with new interest. Invitations, actual invitations, were extended, tentative at first, then increasingly assured. And always the Duke was there. He listened when she spoke. He asked her questions no one had ever thought to ask. When others attempted to dominate the conversation, his silence alone bent the room back toward her. It was intoxicating. And terrifying. By the third event of the week, society had decided. Miss Eleanor Fairlie was favored. "She will not last," Eleanor overheard one matron murmur behind a fan. "Blackmoor does not indulge sentiment." "She is cleverer than she looks," came the reply. "And that makes her dangerous." Eleanor should have taken comfort in that. Instead, unease coiled in her chest. For the Duke had begun to look at her differently. Not always. Not in public. But in the quiet moments, when he offered his arm in an empty corridor, or paused beside her carriage longer than necessary, there was a tension in him she had not anticipated. "You forget yourself," she told him one afternoon as they strolled through a winter garden dusted with frost. His gaze lingered on her profile. "Do I?" "This arrangement," she said carefully, "was never meant to feel personal." His jaw tightened. "Feelings are not part of the bargain." "And yet," she said, stopping short, "you seem displeased when I am attended by others." He did not answer at once. Then quietly, "I do not like being misrepresented." Her heart thudded. "Or replaced." The silence stretched. Before he could respond, a voice cut through the moment. "Your Grace." Lady Marybelle Hawthorne stood a few paces away, beautiful, accomplished, unimpeachably suitable. Exactly the sort of woman the Duke was meant to marry. She smiled at Eleanor with thin politeness. "My mother requests the honor of your company this evening," Lady Marybelle said, her eyes never leaving the Duke's face. Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. "Of course," the Duke replied. He turned to Eleanor. "You will excuse us." She inclined her head. "Naturally." He left without another word. That night, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the truth settling heavily in her chest. The Duke was choosing. And she was not meant to be chosen. The following days were agony. He appeared less often at her side. His attention turned outward, toward women of rank and fortune. Society noticed, and adjusted its expectations accordingly. So did Eleanor. When he finally sought her out again, it was in the small morning room at Blackmoor House. "You wished to see me?" she asked coolly. "I wished to thank you," he said. "My search is nearly concluded." The words struck like a blade. "I am glad," she lied. "Then our bargain draws to a close." His gaze sharpened. "You are displeased." "I am prepared," she said. Which was always the point. He studied her as though seeing her anew. "You have done precisely as promised," he said. "You will be well provided for." She laughed then softly, bitterly. "Provided for? You taught me to be visible, my lord. I cannot now return to being invisible without consequence." He took a step closer. "I never intended to wound me," she finished. "Nor did you intend to notice me." Silence pressed between them, heavy and unresolved. "I will withdraw," Eleanor said. gracefully, before speculation turns cruel. His voice dropped. You do not wish me happiness? She met his gaze steadily, though her heart ached. I wish you exactly what you seek. And with that she curtsied, deep, perfect, and walked away, leaving the Duke of Blackmore staring after the one woman he had never meant to want. The announcement came at Lady Ashcombe's musicale. It was meant to be an elegant affair, strings, candlelight, carefully curated intimacy. Eleanor attended only because absence now would provoke more gossip than her presence. She wore a gown of deep green velvet, understated but unmistakably fine. She no longer hid herself. She had learned that lesson too well. She did not expect the Duke of Blackmore to arrive late. Nor did she expect him to cross the room with deliberate purpose and stop directly before her. Miss Fairley, he said, his voice carrying just enough to command attention. I require a word. A hush rippled outward. Eleanor's heart began to pound. This is hardly the place. No, he agreed. But it is the moment. He offered his arm. Every instinct screamed warning, but she took it. They moved to the center of the room, the musicians faltering into silence. Lady Ashcombe looked as though she might faint. My lord, Eleanor said quietly, you are courting catastrophe. He leaned closer. I have already lived with the consequences of restraint. Then he straightened and addressed the room. I have been accused, he said evenly, of indecision, of cold calculation, of toying with the affections of eligible women. Murmurs erupted. I will correct the record. Eleanor's breath caught painfully. I have chosen, the Duke of Blackmore said. And I will not apologize for it. He turned to her. Miss Eleanor Fairley, will you do me the honor of becoming my Duchess? For a heartbeat the world ceased. Then chaos. Gasps. Exclamations. A dropped fan clattered against the floor like a gunshot. Eleanor stared at him, shock rendering her speechless. My lord, she whispered, this was not the agreement. No, he said. It is the truth. Her pulse roared in her ears. You require a bride of rank. I require a woman of substance. You will be ruined, she hissed. They will say you were manipulated. They may say whatever they please, he replied. I will say only this. I chose the woman who stood beside me without seeking advantage, who spoke when silence was safer, who saw me without fear. Tears burned behind her eyes. And if I refuse? He met her gaze, unflinching. Then I shall accept your decision. Publicly. Entirely. The power of the choice, real, undeniable, made her knees weak. She saw then the risk he took. The vulnerability laid bare. The room held its breath. Eleanor lifted her chin. You asked for honesty, she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Then hear mine. She turned to the assembly. I entered into an arrangement with His Grace believing myself invisible. I leave it having learned my worth was never contingent upon his favor, or yours. A ripple of surprise followed her words. She faced the Duke again. I will not accept a proposal born of scandal or impulse, she said. But if you ask me, truly, privately, without spectacle, then I will give you my answer. His expression softened, something fierce and reverent in his eyes. Then I shall ask you again, he said quietly. Properly. The tongue buzzed, but the worst of the scandal had already taken root. The feared Duke had been undone. And the wallflower had become the woman everyone would remember. The Duke asked properly. Not in a ballroom crowded with judgment, nor beneath chandeliers hungry for spectacle, but in the small, quiet library at Blackmore House, where the windows looked out over winterbear trees and the fire burned low and steady. Eleanor stood before the shelves, fingers trailing along worn spines. The room smelled of leather, smoke, and time. Felt honest. I am not a romantic man, the Duke said behind her. I never aspired to be. She turned. He had removed his coat. His cravat was loosened, as though ceremony had been set aside with deliberation. I entered this bargain believing myself immune to attachment, he continued. I believed affection to be a liability. And then I watched you navigate a world determined to overlook you, and refuse to disappear. Her chest tightened. You gave me what no woman had before, he said. Not obedience. Not ambition. But truth. She met his gaze. Truth is rarely convenient. Which is precisely why I value it. He took a measured step closer. I will not promise you ease, Eleanor Fairley. Nor blind devotion. But I will promise this. Your voice will never be diminished in my house. Your mind will be sought, not tolerated. And your worth will never again be questioned. Emotions swelled, dangerous and bright. You once offered me visibility, she said softly. You cannot now ask me to step into your shadow. I would never, he replied. I ask you to stand beside me. Silence stretched between them, not empty but full. Eleanor thought of the girl she had been. Quiet, careful, waiting to be chosen. She thought of the woman she had become. Seen, sharpened, unafraid. She exhaled. I will not marry you out of gratitude, she said. Nor out of fear. I would accept nothing less, he replied. I will marry you, she continued, only because I choose you. Because in teaching me to be visible, you revealed yourself as well. A rare smile touched his lips, unguarded, genuine. Then I am honored beyond measure. When their engagement was announced, quietly without fanfare, the ton reacted exactly as expected. With astonishment. Some whispered manipulation. Others cried romance. A few recognized something more unsettling. A match built not on advantage but equality. Eleanor weathered it all. On her wedding day she wore ivory silk unadorned by excess. She walked into the chapel not as a girl hoping to be noticed, but as a woman fully present in her own life. The Duke watched her approach with unmistakable pride. Years later, when society had long moved on to fresher scandals, Eleanor would stand in the great halls of Blackmore House and reflect on the bargain that had changed everything. She had sought survival. She had found sovereignty. And the feared Duke? He had sought a bride. He had found his equal. Epilogue. What the ton never understood. They said the Duke of Blackmore had been tamed. They were wrong. He had been met. And Miss Eleanor Fairley, the wallflower who dared to bargain, became the Duchess who taught the ton a dangerous lesson. That the most powerful transformation is not being chosen, but choosing oneself first. Some love stories begin with longing. Others with chance. But the most dangerous ones begin with a choice. Eleanor Fairley was never waiting to be rescued, only to be seen. And when she finally stepped into the light, she didn't just change her fate. She changed the rules of the world that had ignored her. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or quietly powerful, then know this. You are not alone and your story is far from finished. Here at Charlotte's Tidal Whispers, we tell tales where wounded hearts are honored, where love is chosen, not begged for, and where even the softest voices can shift the tide. Subscribe to Charlotte's Tidal Whispers for more emotionally rich romances, slow burn devotion, and stories where women reclaim their worth and rewrite their destiny. Leave a comment and tell me, at what moment did Eleanor truly become visible to you? Like and share this story with someone who needs the reminder that being overlooked does not mean being unworthy. Until our next whisper. Remember, the tide always turns for those brave enough to stand in it.